Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to track 62 of the 4x4 Earth podcast. How to recover when your vehicle is bogged so that you can avoid tragedy.
Join James from 4x4earth.com as he learns all there is to know about four-wheel driving, camping, fishing, and getting out and exploring our great country on the 4x4 Earth podcast.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is the second track of our interview with Matt from MadMatt 4-Wheel Drive. We're going through the tragic accident that happened to Ryan Woods in Arizona last week. So, out for a good day of 4-wheel driving, got stuck, called a mate to help him, and tragically a tow hitch has broken. It's gone through the windscreen and killed Ryan in front of his family. This is really quite a tragedy, horrific circumstances. And so what we want to do is to make sure that everyone's aware that you shouldn't be recovering off points that aren't rated for that recovery, and maybe look at some of the alternatives from a snatch recovery. To do that, we've got Matt from MadMatt 4-Wheel Drive, and he's sharing with us all of his expertise from many, many recoveries. Let's get back into the interview now. The scenario is they're bogged, well and truly bogged. How could they have gotten out of that situation? The alternatives then, what do you think, like given the equipment that they had, what do you think would have been better?
My observation in the US is I'm coming to the answer of your question, but I want to start here. My observation of the US is that there's a resistance or reluctance to using winches in their recoveries. And I think, I could be wrong, I think it comes from this sense of, at the moment you pull the winch out, you've kind of proven that you don't really have the guts or the balls to do the job properly, and so you've kind of gone for the cheap method. We don't have that issue here in Australia, which is really cool, but I have sort of seen that. So what I'm saying in that is that there doesn't seem to be a natural desire to go for the winch as the first port of call. But I've been working with Factor 55 guys for about 8 years now, and they're helping to change the mentality, which is great, because here's the beauty of a winch recovery over a kinetic recovery. The winch recovery is completely controlled, and it's got a number of inherent safeties within that. Firstly, you've got your hand on a button, you can see what's happening. Oh, my anchor's pulling out of the ground. Oh, something's caught on a tree root. Oh, the vehicle's not moving. Oh, the winch has started to stall out. These are all good indicators that you just take your finger off the button and all of that can be controlled. So a winch is nice in that sense. You've got a winch motor that's got a certain amount of power. Once it runs out of power, it just stops turning around. You don't keep increasing horsepower. You've got a battery which has got the same issue. You've also got the winch rope on the winch drum has only got a certain number of layers. So it's strongest at the first layer, but most recoveries actually would happen in the third and fourth layer of winch rope. So where the winch is actually weakest, because most people, oftentimes they don't have to pull all their winch rope out. Obviously exceptions to the rule. So there's a number of significant benefits to a winch recovery from those perspectives. And then you've got your double line pulls and that, which slow the procedure down. They do increase the procedure, but the strength of the procedure, but you've now increased it across two winch lines as opposed to one. So there's considerations to be had in that in your rigging, but these are all good reasons to use a winch recovery. Now, in what I'm saying all of that is to say, if I turned up to this recovery, my most powerful recovery tool is going to be the shovel, is going to be traction boards, and then I'm going to probably look at my winch. That's how I would approach this recovery. So I'd dig out under the front of the vehicle if I'm going forward. Oftentimes, though, you're better off going backwards. So assuming I could drive around to the rear of the vehicle, I'd hook up to the rear of that vehicle and look to drag it backwards, but I don't know the lie of the land as to whether that would be practical or not. So I'd look to go backwards. I'd reduce recovery load. I would look at getting some traction boards in underneath there, and then I would hook up my winch in such a way that it's going to work and do a fairly straight line pull. I would have the driver of the Super Duty that's bogged drive assist whilst I winch. And that's how I think I would approach this sort of recovery. And we would just do taste and see. One of the other techniques you can use in this situation as well with winching is to apply load and wait. So load up the winch and then just sit there and wait. And what you're doing in that moment is applying a load that's allowing the vacuum to release slowly. So when you pull on the vehicle, there might be a little crack in the suction and allows air to start filtering in underneath the vehicle and moisture to get down where the mud's sucking onto the vehicle. And then you'll find if you wait for maybe 5, 10, 15 minutes, you'll hit the winch controller and you'll winch the vehicle in another 20 centimetres or so, or it might only be 10 millimetres or so. But then you just let it sit again, and all of a sudden you'll find the vehicle's actually coming out, but it just takes time to allow that suction to work. So that's how I'd approach this recovery with the information I have.
They are really quite confronting photos, are they? Because I just think, this is a situation that pretty much anyone who goes four-wheel driving could find themselves in. Because it looks like just one of those little places that people go to get a bit of mud on their vehicle.
Yeah. This is the worst part about it is there's a mentality, Sunday afternoon, hey, it's pissing down rain. Hey, let's go for a bit of a drive out in the fall, out in the paddock and have a bit of fun. Yeah, that'd be great. Come on, kids, let's load up. We're all fun. Then we get bogged. Now, our mindset is we're in fun mode. But the moment we get bogged, we need to put our brains into work mode. And it's a bit like, I'm sure most of the guys who are listening to this, and I'm sure, generally speaking, these Full Drive podcasts are listened to by us guys, so I'll say it in that way, not having a go at the ladies. But for us guys, we come home from work, and we'll come home, and oftentimes we'll sit on the couch and go into comatose mode. The brain just stops working, and nothing's functioning. What's actually happening in our brain is we're actually transitioning from a work mode into home mode. And if you're in that mode and your wife starts in your face, you can't cope. You do it, you get messes with your head and you don't transition well. But then all of a sudden, I know for me, it'll be like a switch just flicks and I'm like, oh, g'day, here you go. Yeah, have a great day. La, la, la. Now, some guys do that on the way home in the car. Some guys stop in the car out front of their house and just sit for 5-10 minutes and then they come into the house. Me, I could never do that. I always had to come home, and so my wife and I had to work through that process. But it's a mental shift that's going on in that example. And I think that similar mental shift needs to happen the moment the vehicle gets bogged. And it's like, okay, guys, fun's over for the moment. We are now going to be serious because we have to recover the vehicle. And this is serious business. People die. We need to make sure none of us die today, okay? So kids and mum, get out of the car and move yourself over to a safe zone. So they do that. And then you make a plan, formulate your plan of attack and start to execute your plan of attack to recover the vehicle as per the hierarchy of recovery.
So for someone heading out who doesn't have... So I think one of the issues that they've had here is that they were probably limited in the equipment that they had. And critically, we're not going out tackling the Simpson. We're not doing blue rag here. We are just going out to get a bit of mud on the vehicle. So I think it stresses the fact that, you should be ready to recover, well, all of the time, really. What equipment are you thinking that you should have in your standard loadout? What have you got what do you think the average four-wheel driver should have?
A shovel.
Yep. That's a good one to start with.
All right. A shovel, set of traction boards, very effective tools. They're very effective. They're a pain in the neck when they're muddy, but they're very effective. I think we'll talk about kinetic rope versus snatch strap in a second. A kinetic rope, some soft shackles, and I would say the kinetic rope is for the tow recoveries. It's there if you need to do a kinetic recovery, but I'd prefer you didn't. If you can afford it and your vehicle's set up for it, some sort of winching device, whether it be a hand winch, like a Turfer-style winch. But these days, I think really electric winches are very capable and very good. Other than that, recovery equipment, really your tyre pressure gauge and air compressor, very powerful tools. And will get most people out of a bogging because most people don't air their tyres down enough for their off-roading adventure. They'll go, I'll drop down to 20 PSI and they're doing they're doing blue rag or something like that. And it's like, maybe you should be getting lower than that. And then when they do get stuck, well, heck, man, drop them down to 10. Get out of your bogged situation and use your compressor to air yourself back up again. Like the amount of tractive drivability you gain from dropping those tyres is just mind-boggling. And so use it to your advantage. I did a video just recently when I was out in the Simpson Desert this year with the guys from all 4x4 Spares. I took their 79 series across the Simpson Desert. My wife, Paula, and I, Mrs. MadMatt, we actually got to be the first vehicle across the Simo this year from west to east, which was the most awesome adventure, to be the only vehicle in the Simo for 2 days. Crazy adventure. But I know. But we did a video where we intentionally bogged the vehicle on the top of a soft sand dune. So this is a 79 series that's on GVM, very heavily loaded. We're by ourselves. We had a winch and sat phones and all the kit, so it's not like we're unsafe or anything, but we intentionally bogged the vehicle in the soft powder sand. I think you've been down to Robe, and you've talked about that sand down there. I haven't been to Robe, but it sounds like it's the same sort of sand. And I intentionally bogged the vehicle, and I intentionally diff locks on, wheel spun the daylights out of it, so that vehicle was bogged completely. Like it wasn't going forward or backwards or anywhere. Unbogged that vehicle in about 15 minutes whilst making a video with just a shovel. That's what I used. And it's on my YouTube channel if anybody wants to go see that, MadMatt 4-Drive. So that's how powerful a shovel is. A shovel is all they needed to get this Super Duty out, in all honesty. It would have taken a bit of time, but it was very doable. Debog that vehicle with just a shovel. So couple that with some traction boards. You can just hear what I'm getting at. We're not doing anything that's going to kill anybody at this point. Like, unless you really lose it with the family and start throwing the shovel around, everyone's safe. So that's the gear I would take. Now, I don't take all of that gear with me all the time. I don't like snatch straps anymore. I've gone away from a snatch strap. The reason being, and I've got these videos up on my YouTube channel of where I blow the fuse on the snatch strap and we show how much force is generated in that moment. And there was a video we did a while back where I blew the fuse and threw a 4.5 ton or 4 3/4 ton rated bow shackle into a tree, and it deformed the bow shackle, exploded the bark on the tree. It was all very dramatic and wild. But the point of that message was that this is the force, this is the terrifying force involved in a kinetic recovery when the fuse blows. Now, that's not a recovery point failing or anything like that. That's the design fuse of the snatch strap. They're designed to fail at the end of the stitching. And I've failed many of them over the years intentionally to see what happens and understand that procedure. And I've come to the conclusion, and like I said earlier in this piece, I'm always learning and I'm always open to learning and changing my technique. So it's not like I know everything about all this now, but the reason I've moved away from snatch straps and moved over to a recovery rope, if I have to do a kinetic recovery, is this, that at the end of the stitching where you have the fuse, we now have a situation where in an uncontrolled energy release moment where I don't know how much energy I'm generating with my four-wheel drive, we blow that fuse, we now have a projectile, which is the strap, flying back towards the other vehicle. Now, I know everyone says, "I'll put your air damper on there and all of that." This is a conversation that we're working through with some of the guys at the moment, but there's many of us in the four drive, sort of this space of the four drive community is starting to feel they're not actually a helpful device. They don't actually work for the most part, and people don't use them correctly for the most part. So they're kind of what they're creating is a false sense of security in the community. I've got my air damper on, I'm safe. Now I can go and drive this sucker like no tomorrow because I've got the air damper on. It's like, well, no, actually, dude, that's not the case. What we would prefer people do is use good condition equipment, quality equipment, not cheap equipment, quality equipment, and use it correctly. And you won't have failures. You won't have problems to deal with. You won't have to have that situation. And the evidence of that is in the rigging industry and crane industry, which obviously works to much higher controlled standards than we are. They're not having failures of things. But, they're not putting air dampers on their crane hooks and stuff like that, are they? So, but that's because the equipment is designed such that it won't fail and the operators know how to use the equipment. And that's sort of where a lot of us are starting to come to now is we're starting to have these conversations of how can we educate people so that they're using the equipment correctly. They won't put up for letting their mate do it wrong. They're training their mates. They're using quality equipment, not Chinesium limit hitch links and bow shackles that are just fake. They're not using rubbish gear. They're using quality gear from reputable suppliers. And they're doing the recovery safe with a mature understanding of the loads and forces that they're generating. I think that's a wonderful world we could live in. And so that's why I'm now moving away from the snatch strap, which has that fuse in it, which, if it's overloaded, will fail, to a recovery rope, which for the most part has no fuse in it, and assuming that you've connected it to appropriate points on the vehicles in an appropriate manner, and then you perform kinetic recovery appropriately with a minimal amount of force, you will be inherently safe in that environment, or as safe as these environments can be. I'm fairly confident to say that situation would be a safe scenario. So the recovery ropes, the other advantage is you can hit on them multiple times. Snatch straps do have a life. They do lose their stretch over time, whereas recovery ropes are designed to be used by a ship that's moored up to a wharf or whatever. That's just sitting there getting hit by the ship all day as the wave movement and wave action goes on. So if it can take that, it's going to take the hits that we give it in our four-wheel drive world. And I think that that's a significant advantage. The downside of the ropes is they're bulkier to carry, and a snatch strap is nice and light to carry. So I think snatch straps do have a place, but it shouldn't be for the hardcore four-wheel driver, is my opinion. It would be more for the casual person who's like, you know what, I'll probably never do a recovery, but I need to have something in my vehicle just in case. Well, I would sort of probably steer them to a snatch strap in that situation, assuming they know how to use them.
That's the big thing. How do you recommend people get an understanding of the correct way to use their equipment?
It's been interesting having this conversation the last couple of days with a few people, like I mentioned Justin Andrews in the video I did in response to this video. And I've also been having initial conversations with Robert Pepper as well, who's an author of a number of books on this subject. And we're starting to think that we need to create a single piece of resource for the global four-wheel drive community that gives them all of the information. The issue in my mind at the moment is that everything's piecemeal. And I'm including myself in this situation. I've done numerous videos on all of the subjects we're covering off here on my channel. But you can come into my channel, and due to the algorithm, you might get shown the video on the bow shackle being blown into the tree, and then next video you get seen is how to join two snatch straps together. But you don't actually get to see how to attach it to your vehicle correctly, and so you don't know to look for that piece of content. So unless you intentionally know to go through the playlists and follow and watch all of the videos, you don't get all of the information in a logical manner. And I think that's one of the issues we're seeing with social media content. It's not formulated in the manner that it would be in a book. And so Robert's written a number of books, and so has Bob Waller in the US. He does a lot of work for Factor 55 and written a number of very, very detailed books on these subjects. And so we're going to start having conversations about getting these guys involved, getting Factor 55. I'd like to get Warn Winches involved. These guys are up there as world leaders in recovery. That's their bread and butter. That's what they live and breathe. And if we can pull together these guys and get some desire within the corporate community to see a change and show their corporate responsibility, I would love to be part of creating a piece of content where every member of the four-wheel drive community across the globe can point to a single piece of content and say, if you're doing a kinetic recovery, you go and watch this piece of content and you will learn everything you need to know about how to do it. And it's not from one single authoritative point, it's from multiple points of authority that bring that piece of content together. So it's a real peer review type of process, obviously expensive. So I need to find people who are going to have the balls to step up to the plate. And so far, Factor 55 is saying the right things, and I'm very proud of them for doing that. So,
well, I think it's an important thing, because I think that social media has got a significant part to play in this, because you don't have to go too far to find videos where people are doing all sorts of crazy things which look good and the algorithm really likes, but they're inherently unsafe and are teaching people the wrong things to do.
Mm. When I started my channel 2013, April 2013, I started MadMatt 4 Drive, and I wanted to make sure that my content always had the best. It was always to the best of my skill set and authority. I'm not saying I know it all. I don't. And I'm not saying for a moment that I'm the guru of this stuff, but I think I've got something to say on the subject. And so I went, even though I'd taught full driving in my full drive club, and I'd worked as a teacher or a trainer, in the mechanical field and stuff like this, and had a bit of experience in that sort of space, I actually chose to go and do a course with Vic Widman. And, I went and did basic four-wheel driving course and got my certificate from Vic at his Great Divide Tours Training Centre in Braidwood. Then I went and did the advanced course and stuff like that, so that I got my full qualifications before I started to really get serious about creating my content. And I often will throw my content across the eyes of the likes of Robert Pepper and say, hey, man, am I hitting the mark on this? Because I want to be accountable and I want to get my content right. And this is the sad part of social media content. You can go and buy a camera and you can go out and do a kinetic recovery training video. That's how easy it is. And you may have no authority and no actual knowledge on what you're doing. You're just rabbiting what you saw somebody else do on another video somewhere. So the Chinese whispers issue becomes a real serious concern. And that's where I feel like if I can find enough desire within the four-wheel drive community to create that single piece of content that is as authoritative as we know how to do it and is accurate as we know how to do it, it then becomes incumbent upon the user to watch and understand that content. And I want to present it in a way that everybody can understand it. So no big numbers, because a lot of us don't understand them, but understand the content so they can apply the content so that when they're in these recovery situations, they go, yeah, I know with confidence what the dangers are, how to manage them. There's one other point in all this, and that is that every single recovery is unique. And this is where, when you're new to four-wheel driving or new to anything, I believe people look for the black and white. This is yes, this is no. But in four-wheel drive recovery, no such thing exists. Everything is grey. So what people need to have is a full arsenal of tools that helps their understanding. So they go, in my unique situation that I'm in now, where my vehicle is bogged, I know how to draw on the relative tools out of my arsenal of equipment and apply a unique custom recovery solution to my situation. And all four-wheel drivers are capable of making those decisions, but they need to be given the information. I don't think there's many people that go out there to kill their mate when they're out four-wheel driving. And we just need to make people more aware and more educated in this space.
All right, I think that's a really good point. Both of them are. No one goes out there with the intention of having a horrific accident like this. But the other component of it is that no recovery is the same. And sometimes you have to get really quite creative and improvise. There's a lot of creative thinking to come up with a solution when you've got a vehicle that's on an angle and it's very slippery and there might not be anywhere that access might be difficult. It can get quite tricky.
Absolutely it can. Absolutely it can. Or there's a video on my YouTube channel where my son rolled his 80 series down in the Victorian High Country. And I mean, that was full on. And if people want to learn, go and watch that video, because what I did, we did film it roughly. It was a stressful environment, but Mrs. MadMatt grabbed the GoPros and we did manage to pull together enough content to really, not to sensationalize it. The video we put up was nothing about that. The video we put up was all about what did we learn from this. And so the way we approached it was we got Robert to come in and critique me in that video. I go, Matt, you did this good. You missed the mark here. This is what we could learn from that, and this is how we should approach that. Because he could come in with a complete viewpoint without the emotion that I was carrying in the moment. Because I'd watch my son upside down in his Land Cruiser off a cliff. Like, I was upset. I was stressed. In hindsight, I was not the person to lead the recovery, but I'm MadMatt. So everybody just defaults to me and I just defaulted to me. That was one of the mistakes. Whereas I had a mate there, Rod, could have managed it as well, but I never drew on his expertise without his because he wouldn't have had that emotional buy-in that I had. So there's lots to be learned. And that's a fascinating video if any of the audience is interested in learning from that situation. It's up there on the YouTube.
Yeah, we can include a link into the show notes. I know one great piece of advice that someone around a campfire when we were talking about recoveries said was, when you've got a recovery that's going to be particularly difficult, or when you've tried 2 or 3 things and none of them have worked, that's probably about the time to have a cup of tea.
100%. Yep. Absolutely.
Take the stress out of it. Accept the fact that you might be there a little bit longer than you were hoping to. Have a tea, have a bit of a chat about it, have a think about what you've got, and you'll often come up with a much, much better solution to the problem.
Yeah, totally agree with that. Absolutely. And that comes back to what I was saying earlier in the piece, where I have and this is what I've learned from myself of that rollover with my son's vehicle, is I need to take the time. And that for me is a weakness. I just roar in with angel's feet of tread. And that's not cool. It's not something I'm proud of. That's something I'm working on with my attitude. I set an example with what I do in the community. I set an example, and I do take that as a very real responsibility, and to make sure that I'm seen to be doing things correctly. It's challenging.
It can be tough. Thank you very much. I think there's a whole heap of value in there for people. I will include links to the videos that you've got, links to Robert's video as well, and a link to where you can see all of the pictures that we've been talking about, because I think there's a few things that come out of those pictures. One, the force that was generated. 2, just how easily anyone could get into that situation. This isn't one of those things where you're thinking, I would have thought twice about doing that. I think that the little mud hole that they got caught in, I think anyone could have got caught in that very, very easily. So, it literally could happen to anyone. And I think that's something that we should all be thinking about, is that, what we do, it can be dangerous. It shouldn't be dangerous. But when you get into these situations, we need to think about it so that, everyone gets to come home safely.
Absolutely.
So, yes, thank you very much for all of your great wisdom.
Well, thank you for having me on. I hope that what I've shared encourages somebody to, and helps people to start considering how they do their recoveries. Like, if I've been so encouraged by some of the feedback we've had from the video we put up on the weekend, where people have told me that the work we've been doing has saved their lives. And that encourages me no end. And other people who've said they've realised that they've been wrong for some years, and they've had the humility and wisdom to recognise it and say, we'll change our ways. That, for me, is success. So I'm very proud of that and applaud those people who are stepping up.
Absolutely, yeah. Doing it. The video is great. So, I highly recommend everyone to have a look at it, and Robert's as well.
Yeah. Thanks very much, James.
No worries.
Pleasure.
Cheers, Matt. Once again, a big thank you to Matt from MadMatt 4-Wheel Drive. Please check out the show notes, have a look at the videos, have a look at the photos, and critically share those around, because I think it's really important that we get as many people aware that it is not safe to conduct a snatch recovery in a situation like that on points that aren't rated using inappropriate equipment. I think Matt's done a really, really good job of educating everyone around that. I'd never really thought about the difference in force generated between a snatch recovery and a tow recovery. A really big difference there. You don't have to go out 4-wheel driving too often to be in that situation where you need a bit of a recovery. And I can tell you, there is a wide variety of ideas that people use when they're trying to do a recovery. And, tragically, sometimes they're not the best ideas out there. And whether it's lack of knowledge or just that real rush to get home, particularly when the sun's starting to go down, people take a few shortcuts. It can have tragic consequences. And that's the last thing I want to finish up with. Just thoughts with Ryan's family, his mate who he called out, who came out to help him, and the emergency responders who would have turned up to what would have been a really tragic sight. So, stay safe out there, because what we do, it can get dangerous from time to time.
4x4earth.com is used by over 200,000 people every month to find great tracks, organise trips, and find out how to better enjoy exploring the great outdoors. There's over 1,000 tracks and 300 campsites ready for you to explore. So check out 4x4earth.com today and sign up to get access to the track information, ask questions, and meet other 4x4 Earthers. Membership is completely free.